Alright, so I played Shadow Generations, and this may be one of the best boost games I've ever played. I'd say the Unleashed boost stages are like number 1 for me, but Shadow Generations is a number 2. Gameplay wise, I'd probably give it a 9 out of 10. Like, I'm just so satisfied with the game. I've never felt this way towards Sonic before. But everyone's talked about the game enough, I don't really have anything to add to that conversation. So instead, let me talk about how much I actually don't like the story. Just generally, I feel like the story is a bit of a nothing burger. It just kind of re-establishes stuff we already knew about Shadow. Honestly, that's not too big of a problem. Like, Shadow needed a reintroduction to a new audience anyways, but it kind of just suffers from the same problem as Sonic Frontiers, where it's just a bunch of people standing around and talking. There's a lot of missed potential with the story, especially with how they use the locations. There are no references to any locations except for Space Colony Arc. Kingdom Valley, Rail Canyon, Sunset Heights, Chaos Island, they're all just there just to be stages. They have pretty much zero relevance to the story. I remember when they revealed Rail Canyon, people were like, oh, this is where Shadow finds out that there are androids of him. And funnily enough, I don't think there are any mentions of Shadow androids, not even in the side content. When they revealed Sunset Heights, I thought it would be cool if Black Doom was showing Shadow the future, kind of going like, hey, you helped Eggman conquer the world in the future, so you might as well just help me instead. But nope, Sunset Heights has zero relevance to the story whatsoever. I don't even know how Black Doom was influencing White Space. He just tapped into the Time Eater's powers, I guess? I don't know what's going on here. Then you have Black Doom's strange obsession with the Radical Highway. Like, it makes no sense. Why is Black Doom's little pocket dimension Radical Highway? Why does he like it so much? I mean, I kind of understand, it's for asset reuse. They already have a bunch of city assets, so they just recolor it and then suddenly it's Radical Highway. But if that was the case, instead of having Rail Canyon, I think they should have had Black Comet instead be the pocket dimension, and then Radical Highway could have just been a regular stage. Just makes a little bit more sense story-wise, and at least Sonic Generations has heroes representation. So yeah, they could have prioritized Shadow the Hedgehog representation, but you know, whatever. At least they have Black Doom, I guess. He's Shadow the Hedgehog representation. But even if the story is a bit of a nothing burger and none of the stages actually matter in the grand scheme of things, I still think it's a poorly written story in some aspects. I've been noticing this, but I really enjoy Ian Flynn's writing during the prologue animations, but I don't like it when it's actually in-game. Like, the Dark Beginnings prologue goes pretty hard. Now, there were some problems I had with it, but when I watched the extended animatic, there were some lines that were cut out of the final thing that explained some of the questions I had. So yeah, it did seem like Ian Flynn had a really solid script there. That was unfortunately cut due to budgetary or time constraints or whatever was going on. He does fail at showing and not telling sometimes, but he is also a comic book writer, so it kind of makes sense that he gets some of that, you know, comic bookisms in there. I'm not too hung up about it. At the end of the day, the stories are tightly written and they're pretty solid. They make sense and, you know, I feel satisfied by the end. But then when I was actually playing Shadow Generations, I felt like there was a few things that felt off. Like, Maria's just deadass overreacting to literally everything. She learns about how Shadow was created with the DNA of the Black Arms, and she just has her, like, hands over her mouth, and she's just, like, in shock. Which is funny, because in the prologue animation, they actually established that she already knew that. Maybe she was taken from a point in time before she knew that, but I don't know, even if it is true, it kind of feels jarring to watch either way. It's weird, in the scene, Gerald says, I made a Faustian deal with Black Doom, and Maria just kind of stands there, not really reacting to anything. Then when he says, oh, Shadow is connected to Black Doom's blood, that kind of seems obvious at this point, and then she starts going like, gasp, no way! There's another scene where Black Doom says he learned from the events of Shadow the Hedgehog, and then Shadow gets really mad over that. Like, isn't that just a given, that when you lose in a fight, you learn from that? I hope Black Doom learned from it. Like, not in the sense that I hope Black Doom wins, but I hope that he's not stupid, because otherwise why would he pose such a big threat? Black Doom is taunting this Shadow guy throughout the entire game, and then he says, I learned from our last encounter. Then Shadow, that's when he loses it, guys. How hard was it to write a scene where Black Doom, like, threatens to hurt Maria or something? Like, come on. There's also another scene after Shadow gains his Doom Wings. He starts screaming, and it kind of feels like Shadow is consumed by anger, which was the point of the scene. This is followed by Gerald apologizing to Shadow for putting him down the path that he has, and then says that he's proud of the way Shadow has walked the path. But then it ends with Maria kind of shouting out Shadow, going like, don't be angry, and then Shadow's just like, don't worry, Maria. I'm doing this keeping your wish in my heart. And I feel like that's just like such a... Why did they do it in that order? Like, shouldn't Shadow be screaming, and then Maria shouts out, Shadow, don't be angry, and then Shadow reassures Maria that he's not angry, he's doing it for her wish. and then Gerald ended off by going, I'm proud of you. Like, that order makes a lot more sense. The scene is implying that Shadow has this destructive anger, and then Gerald says, I'm proud of you, before Shadow actually explains himself. Unless this was purposefully done, like Gerald is about to go insane, guys. That's why he's saying he's proud of an insane Shadow. And I also feel like there just could have been a lot more done between Shadow, Maria, and Gerald. Like, I feel like they should have had a lot more interactions. Even if nothing really happens, a lot more wholesome, down-to-earth, slice-of-life kind of interactions would have helped. This is the first time we've seen Gerald and Maria here in the present, not just in a flashback. There's like a bit of dialogue where Big the Cat says he invited Gerald to do some fishing, and that would have been nice to actually see in a cutscene. Shadow also considers the possibility of changing Maria's fate, but nothing comes from that until the very end where they start disappearing. And then Shadow's just like, wait, I'll stop time and then fix everything. You're gonna die, guys, don't leave me. There's also this weird thing in Dark Beginnings where Rouge investigates the Time Eater, but nothing comes of that in the game. There's a writing principle called Chekhov's gun, and that's basically where if you have a gun hanging from the ceiling, it's gonna get fired later in the story. And basically, if it's not gonna get fired, then don't have the gun in the first place. And he does that with Gun obtaining info on the Time Eater, and he kind of does that in Frontiers too, where Knuckles actually stops Sage's attack, even though he's in a digitized form that can't interact with anything. So when I was playing the game, I was just like, oh, that means that Knuckles can interact with Sage in some way. I wonder if this is gonna come up later in the story, and it doesn't. So yeah, Ian Flynn, check your Chekhov's gun. Make sure to fire it every time you see it. And one last complaint, in Dark Beginning, Shadow says that he's investigating Space Colony Ark because he sensed Black Doom's presence on there. But in the game itself, Shadow says that Gun detected a biosignature on the Ark. That being said, it's not like I hated the entire thing. I really liked the goodbye scene between Shadow and Maria. It was actually really good. I don't know how I feel about the implication that Maria knows that she'll be separated from Shadow. She doesn't know that she'll die, but based on Shadow's reaction to her disappearing, it's very obvious that he loses her at some point in some way. Whether she dies or she's just physically separated from him, you know, she doesn't know, but still, it's a weird implication there. It just implies that when she was shot on the Ark, she was probably thinking, oh, this is why Shadow was so desperate for me to stay in white space. I also really like how we've solidified why Shadow is named Shadow. It's because shadows lead you to the light. This was a thing in a manga that was posted online, but it's only in Japanese. There is a fan translation of it, obviously, but it's not like an easily accessible thing for a mainstream audience. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the Shadow Generation story. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Bye.